Good afternoon. This is Thomas Hazlitt. I'm in here with a vet, David C. Crawford, here at Bellevue University Veterans Center on September 9th, 27th, 2022. David, tell me a little bit where you were born and about your home.
I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, at the Methodist Hospital on Cumming Street. That is not there anymore. And I lived in Omaha until about the age of 13, and my family moved down to Shenandoah, Iowa.
Your parents, what were they doing that caused the move?
Oh, my father worked at the UP Railroads as a machinist foreman, and he took retirement and moved to Shenandoah to buy the bowling alley.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You learned how to bowl well?
Oh, I was fair. Never good, but I was fair.
What year was that?
We moved to Shenandoah in 1961.
1961. How old were you then?
13.
13, wow. Did your mother work?
Not until we moved to Shenandoah. She helped run the bowling alley.
Did you have siblings?
I've got a brother, John, who's retired from the Navy.
Oh, really?
A sister, Sherry, and a sister, Betty.
How long did your brother stay in the service?
He stayed in for 20.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
When did you join the service?
In July of 1965.
How active was Vietnam at that time?
Very.
Really? Did your tell me the story about telling your parents about joining?
Okay. My brother John called up one night from San Diego and talked to my mom for a while. And he says he wanted to talk to me. So I said, "Hi, John." He says, "Hi, when are you going to join the Navy?" And I said, "I don't know, I hadn't thought about it." And he says, "Well, you ought to join tomorrow so you can go on the next Westpac cruise with me." I said, "Okay, I'll go join tomorrow." And my mom cried until I was out of town.
Really?
Yeah.
How did your dad take it?
He was fine.
Really?
Yeah. About the time I grew up.
Did your siblings have any issues?
No.
No.
Yeah.
Um,
The sisters are both older than me. They were moved out of the house by then.
So you did join the next day?
Well, the recruiter wasn't there the next day, so I called him up and told him I wanted to join, but he wasn't here, so I can't. He says, "I'll be there tomorrow." And the next day he showed up, and we did all the paperwork and the physical and sent me to San Diego.
What? So your brother talked you into going to
Yeah.
the Navy?
Yeah, our plan was to get on the same ship on brother duty. But from boot camp, they sent me to a ship on the East Coast called the USS Opportune, ARS-41. And the ship wasn't in Norfolk where it was supposed to be. So they flew me to Scotland to catch the ship. And we left Scotland, took a cruise around the world.
What ports did you hit?
From Scotland we went to Gibraltar, Crete, Egypt, Arabia, Ceylon, the Philippines, Japan, Hawaii, San Diego, Acapulco, Panama, and Norfolk. The reason for the cruise was that we were in Rosyth, Scotland. They had a Queen's barge of some kind, a salvage vessel, that they wanted in the Philippines. And our captain took the commission to tow it to the Philippines, and a Navy fleet tug took another barge just like it to the Philippines on the same cruise.
What was the what was the best part?
Best port? Scotland.
Really? Why?
It was just friendly. It was a nice place. Good people.
And the worst?
I don't know. I was a crazy kid. I enjoyed them all.
The ship you were on, what does the what was it?
An ARS.
What does that mean?
As Auxiliary Rescue and Salvage.
Is it a big ship or?
213 foot long, 39 foot wide, flat on the bottom. It bobbed like a cork in the ocean. And sick. I've never been so sick in my life.
Really? So, what was the worst part of the cruise itself? Being sick, or?
The worst part was when we left Ruthai, Scotland. We went down a river to the English Channel. There was a storm, and the ship's bell would ring at about a 45-degree list. And it was going bong, 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 bong. And we spent 3 days going a knot backward because the weather was pushing us backward before we started making forward knots.
Where you spent your most of the time underneath, down below?
I spent a lot of my time down in the engine room or working on things inside the ship.
Well, let's go back to basic training. Where was that?
San Diego.
Any memorable things happen there?
I remember I've never been restricted that much before in my life, and it was interesting. It's made to weed out the guys who can't hack it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and some of them got weeded out. Most of the guys made it through just fine, and it's to teach us the basic things we need to know to be a sailor.
Any bad times there for personal?
No, not really.
Any good, funny times?
Not that I can remember right now. I do know one of the guys from Shenandoah went to basic. He was in a company before me, and he messed up somehow. I don't know what he did, but they gave him a toothbrush and made him scrub the gas chamber out.
The gas chamber?
Yeah, we had to put on gas masks and go in the gas chamber to see what it was like, and they made him scrub it with a toothbrush. Poor Bill.
Did he make it all the way through?
Yeah.
So you didn't have any jobs coming up through high school?
I washed dishes in a cafe. I worked in a small tree nursery.
Oh,
Small tree nursery.
oh, okay.
They grew little trees. And I worked there doing various kids' jobs.
So you enlisted into the Navy, and your brother taught you into it. Do you ever regret that?
No, I don't. After the cruise around the world and got back to Norfolk, Virginia, my request for brother duty went through, and I went to San Diego and got on the ship with my brother.
What was the ship?
The USS Richard S. Edwards, DD-950.
DD-950, what does that mean?
Destroyer.
Really?
Yeah.
Had the same job?
My job was basically the same. It was a steam-powered ship, so I wasn't working on the propulsion engines. I was working on auxiliary engines to make the light and electricity for the ship. And just working on the air conditioning and different pumps, basically the same job, different ship.
What did your brother do?
He was a boilerman. He operated the propulsion boilers.
And they were diesel power?
No.
No?
No, steam powered.
So how?
You You supply fuel to the boiler. The boiler heats water into steam. On that ship, it was 1,200 pounds of pressure, 970 degrees superheated steam, and they would send the steam to the engine room, where it went through steam turbine engines to propel the ship. I got to work in the boiler room a few times. It was hot.
Really?
Yeah,
That was his main...
Yeah, it was his main place. It was miserably hot in the boiler room.
Really? How many people were on the ship?
I think there were about 270, I think, officers and enlisted.
Did he... how old was he? Older than you?
Oh, he's 2 years older than I am.
So he's... he went in right after?
He went in about 2 years before I did.
Out of high school?
All right.
Did you look up to him, wanting to join and all that?
Yes, still do.
Really? Okay. So you left your parents and your two sisters. Any pets that you left behind? Or?
No, I didn't leave any pets behind.
So the training that you got in the Navy, was that a career field that you wanted to go into? Interest?
Yeah, I guess so. I've been doing it the rest of my life. I've worked as a maintenance mechanic and a stationary engineer, which is a stationary boiler operator, instead of a floating around the ocean boiler operator. And I've worked as a mechanic my whole life's career.
So you had the aptitude for the mechanic mind.
I must have.
Your schooling, how long was it?
My schooling in the Navy?
Yeah.
On-job training.
Really?
Yeah.
Was there any, what was the best practical joke that happened that you can remember?
Oh, goodness. I don't know if you call it a practical joke or it was an initiation.
Oh, okay.
When the ship went across the equator, we did a ceremony, and it was an initiation from going from a polywog, somebody who hasn't been across the equator, to a shellback who has been across the equator. And the first thing they did was they as we crawled down the deck, they spanked us with fire hoses, and not hard, but we got to where the ceremony was being held. We had to kiss the royal baby's tummy. That was the fattest guy on the ship. They greased his tummy up with nasty taste and stuff, and we had to kiss his tummy. And we had to kiss the Queen's toe. Was the guy in the next chair. And we had to go to the royal doctor, and the royal doctor pulled our pants down a little bit and spanked us on the bottom with a wire brush, and then poured some vinegar on it. We got our hair cut. I don't know if you've ever seen a shellback. They took the razor and went zzz.
Just one?
Yes, one. Yeah. And the last part of it, we had to climb in. They had a tarp draped up by four corners and had it like a trough. And we had to climb in that tarp full of garbage and salt water. And one of the guys, one of the shellbacks that was initiating, took a fire hose and blasted you, knocked you down. My brother came up all spitting and sputtering. And the guy says, "What are you?" He says, "I'm a polywog." And the guy's Knocked him down again. My brother got up and says, "What are you?" He says, "I'm a pollywog." Knocked him down the third time. He came up spitting and sputtering. And the guy says, "What are you?" I said, I was right behind him. I said, "You're a shellback, dummy." "I'm a shellback." They let him out of the garbage.
Is that when you went through also?
Yeah, I went through right behind him.
Okay. How was the food on this ship?
Pretty good, really.
24-hour dining?
No, we had 3 meals a day, and they were all 3 pretty good.
Did you? What was the worst time on the ship besides the boat? Was the living accommodations adequate, or?
Well, our rack was a piece of tubing that went around, and it had a canvas canvas mat laced into it with rope, and that's what we slept on, was on the canvas, and a little thin mattress on top of that. But it really wasn't bad. I slept really good. The ship rocked us to sleep. but no, berthing accommodations were fine. The food was pretty good. Every once in a while they'd come up with some kind of meal that was awful, but usually it was pretty good. A cook on my first ship fixed a special for us one breakfast. He says, "I've got something special in the meal today. Everybody's going to love this." I was mess cooking at the time, so I had to do the dishes when everybody got done eating. And they'd bring their tray over and dump it in a garbage can, and I'd collect the trays and wash them. And I had to carry out the garbage. I had to have help carrying out the garbage that day. He put dehydrated onions in the pancake, and they were awful. And he was telling everybody how great they were, so everybody's getting 4 or 5 pancakes and throwing them away. That's the worst meal.
Well, what's the best one?
Well, I would say the lobster that we had when we left Port Said, Arabia, but 4 of us got food poisoning from the lobster. Tasted good, but it gave us 4 of us food poisoning.
When you, since you didn't go to tech school, your family didn't come and see you off, or?
Yeah. Yeah, they saw me when I came home on leave.
Really? Geez, what was the hardest part about learning your job?
Oh, goodness. It wasn't that hard to learn. Part of the time it was hard to do because my second-class petty officer who was in charge of me was an alcoholic, and he made life hard.
How did the alcohol make it on the ship?
If we were out to sea for a few days, he'd be fine. But if we were in port, he was drunk.
Did you have, during that time, did you have he was your boss all the time on that first ship? Or
on the second ship.
On the second one.
Yeah.
Getting back to that trip around the world, how long did that take you?
About 9 months.
And
the ship went 15 knots, which is about 17 miles an hour. We had a barge that we were towing that was as big as our ship. That slowed us down.
Did you ever go meet one of those waves, that rogue wave or something?
No. That's fine. I didn't want to.
Let's from that ship, did you go to Vietnam off of that destroyer?
Off the first ship?
No, the second one.
The second ship. We were in Vietnamese waters.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We didn't go on Vietnam, but we were close enough we could see it, and it's what's classified as a blue water sailor ship, blue water Navy ship, which means that we've been close enough to Vietnam to get the effects of Agent Orange.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to that later, I guess. How long did you stay in Vietnam? I mean, that
In
blue
Viet-
water.
Well, we were in the area for 6 months. We would go to Vietnam and do our thing, fire. We blew up ammo dumps and fuel dumps and storage houses, you know, food warehouses. Excuse me. And we blew up their highway a few times, and whatever they told us to fire at, we would hit. And we would be in the war zone for a while. Then we'd go to a nearby port and restock our ammunition, do any repairs that need to be done. Then we go back to Vietnam. So we were in and out of Vietnam waters on a regular basis for that 6 months.
Is that your only tour?
Vietnam? Yes. The first ship I was on, the barges that the other ship and our ship carried to the Philippines were used for Vietnam service. So I got my Vietnam medals off my first ship and got stars on them from my second ship.
What was the experience for life on the ship itself during that time?
It was pretty good. You know, of course, we had to go to general quarters quite often, which is a real change in routine. But
How's that?
we had to go to our battle stations and stay in that place to protect what was around our battle station. Part of the time mine was the high pressure air compressor that they used to fire the guns with, and part of the time it was in a damage control area, and different men had different areas they went to because of their different jobs. You know, like a radio man would be in a radio shack, and etc.
Were you ever fired upon, or?
Just one time the Commodore noticed that nobody really believed. I told you. You may tell the camera? Okay, we pulled into the Vietnamese waters. They announced over the paging system that we were in Vietnamese waters. In order to draw battle pay, you have to be in the Vietnamese war zone for 15 days of the month, or be fired upon. About 5 minutes. This was the last day of the month, and about 5 minutes into the battles area, we all were summoned to go to general quarters, and after we were in general quarters for about 5 minutes, the Commodore got on the paging system and said, "This is the Commodore speaking, men. We are in Vietnamese waters. I saw a shell land off the port bow. We have been fired upon. We will collect battle pay." So we got an extra $65 that week, that month.
Did you get any reports back of once you fired your weapons and your guns? Did you hear what you were hitting?
Yes, they reported back to us what we had damaged and you know, on a regular basis. Our guns were 5-inch 54 caliber guns, and they would fire a projectile 20 miles dead accurate where we aimed it to. So we could pretty much hit what they told us. The Air Force would fly over and give us coordinates, and we would fire at that coordinate.
And you heard they would report back to the ship?
Yeah, they would report back to us what we had what we had damaged.
Did that bother you at all?
I don't like war, so yes.
What's the was that the only time you were in Vietnam? That one deployment?
Yeah, that 6-month period.
And of that deployment, the report back of what you had, how did that really shape you, of what you were doing, shape your thoughts of what you were doing at the time?
Not really. I just had to kind of accept what I was told to do.
Really? Did you, let me see, at that time, did you have any scary, well, since you weren't fired upon per se,
No, nothing scary.
nothing scary.
Felt pretty safe.
Did you develop any close friendships that still last today?
Yes.
Really? Are they?
The ship had some of the crew of the ship had a reunion in Branson, Missouri, quite a few years ago, and decided it would be a good idea to have a reunion every other year. So we've been having a reunion every other year until COVID. COVID screwed up the whole country, the whole world. But until COVID came around, we had a reunion every other year for the last probably 20 years.
Did you pick it back up?
Yeah.
How many people would go?
Well, we had quite a few, usually around 70, 80.
Really?
But they're not having one until, I think, 2 years from now, because of the fear of COVID.
That deployment, you never went into Vietnam. What station, where did you go to get repaired?
Oh, Hong Kong, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines.
What place was best there?
I kind of liked Japan and the Philippines the best.
What was good about it?
Just friendly people, a lot to do. In Japan you could buy almost anything really cheap, and yeah, mostly the friendly people.
How long would it take to get repaired?
Oh, we'd be in port for probably a week and a half at a time. In Japan and the Philippines we stayed longer.
Did you have to stay on the ship, or?
No.
No?
We still lived aboard the ship, but we could go on liberty.
Anyone get in trouble?
Oh, yeah, everybody got in trouble. Yeah, some of the guys went over and got pretty wild and caused a lot of problems. You know, act like a bunch of drunken sailors.
Did you have any reaction, a bad reaction at the port of protests or things like that? Any of those ports?
Not in those ports.
Oh, really?
When we left the Westpac, we went down to a little fueling station called Manus Island, and from Manus Island we went to Queensland, Australia, and spent a few days. And that's when we went across the equator. It was on the way to Queensland. And we left there, went to New Zealand and Samoa and Hawaii and San Diego on our return cruise. While I was in New Zealand, I was in a restaurant getting some food, and a guy, there were a few people sitting in a booth ways away from me. One of the guys came up to me and said, "You're an American sailor, aren't you?" I'm sitting there in a sailor suit. Yeah, it's kind of obvious. I said, "Yes, I am." He says, "I hate America. I hate American sailors." I said, "Okay." He says, "Americans go over to Vietnam and kill women and children." I said, "Hey, buddy, go leave me alone." He says, "You're terrible. You kill women and children." I said, "Hey," I stood up and said, "Hey, I haven't killed anybody yet. You want to be number one?" And the guy went away. That's the biggest protest I got.
Really?
And the other New Zealanders thanked me for sitting this guy down.
Was he an older guy or younger, same age?
I'd guess he'd be in his 20s.
Really?
Yeah, a couple years older than I was.
What experienced that you had that shaped you, that may have affected you the rest of your life? You mentioned about knowing where your shells were going. Did that affect you rest of your life?
No. There's not a lot of sense in dwelling on what you can't change, and there was nothing I could do about. I don't know if anybody was killed. I think about it sometimes, but I don't dwell on that. The things that shaped me the most would be the growing up, the becoming more mature. I went as an 18-year-old kid, came back as a 21-year-old adult. And while I was gone on the ships, I learned quite a bit about mechanics, and I enjoyed what I did, so I kind of made that a life career.
Life on the ship, I'm sure it's dangerous. Was there any
Can be.
Accidents that you saw, that anything that would have...
One of the gunner's mates, they were loading one of their guns and he dropped the shell. It was a 3-inch 32 caliber shell, so it's about 3 inches around and about that long. He dropped it, and one of the other gunner's mates grabbed it and threw it over the side just as quick as he could, and it blew up in the water. That could have been really bad.
Why? Is that normal for that shell to react that way? Or?
It's not normal to drop them. Yeah, I think it is. That's why the other one grabbed it and threw it over so quickly. Before I got on that ship, they were in some really bad weather, and they had some Freon bottles that were about 4 foot tall and about 12 inches around, welded to the had welded brackets, and they were in the welded brackets. And one of these Freon bottles broke loose because the waves hit it so hard, and it hit a weather door and broke the door open and killed the guy. And about washed 2 guys over the side.
That was before you got it?
Before I got there. My brother was there at that time.
Really? Did it, I'm sure he told you about it and all that.
Oh yeah.
It's a dangerous place.
Yeah, well, working with 1,200 pounds of steam pressure is dangerous.
But it seems like nothing happened?
Nothing serious. I have steam leak now and then, but yeah, it's a dangerous thing to be around. So, and there were a lot of other things that were dangerous. So you had to pay attention to where you were at and what you were doing most of the time.
So you spent that 6 months in Vietnam, and that would be at what year mark? You only stayed in for 4?
That was in 1967.
So You were in how many years?
3.
3 years? Then you, where did you go, where did your ship go from there back to the United States?
Yeah, I went from there to Manus Island, Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, Hawaii, and San Diego. And shortly after that I got out.
I bet that was a good trip, coming back.
Yeah.
You didn't want to stay in, or?
No. Nope, I think 3 was enough. About 10 years later, I joined the Coast Guard and spent 2.5 years in Gulfport, Mississippi, and 1.5 years in Niagara Falls, New York, at Coast Guard stations.
Why did you do that?
The economy was upside down, and jobs were hard to find, and I was thinking I'd do 17 more years and I could retire. I did 4 years of that, and that was enough.
You didn't like the Coast Guard, huh?
I'm not the lifer type.
What, same job?
Yeah.
Oh, when you got back to the States, how were you discharged?
Honorably.
No, I mean,
well, after when my time was up, I went to a transit barracks and took a physical and filled out the paperwork for discharging. Of course, they gave me a re-enlistment lecture, asked me if I was interested in sticking around, and I told them no. But after the physical and paperwork, they gave me my discharge papers.
did you have to, a lot of people get spat upon and stuff, the Army guys coming back. So you...
I was never mistreated by civilians.
So, did you have to go back home in uniform, or did you go have some new clothes?
When I got out, I packed my uniforms, wore civilian clothes home.
How was that trip back home? How was the reception at home?
Fine.
Really?
All my friends were happy to see me. My family was happy to see me. No negative at all.
Really? Good party?
Hmm?
Was it a good party at the bowling alley?
Yeah, yeah.
How did the community treat you?
Just fine.
Really?
Yeah.
Small
Small town. I already knew everybody in town.
Did you, where did you go from there into your career field? How did you get into your...
Oh, that took me a few years. I put in jobs to be a maintenance mechanic in different places and didn't get any work, so I worked in a beef packing plant for a couple of years and hated it. And got an opportunity to go to work in a turkey processing plant as a maintenance mechanic. And from then on, well, I used my GI educational benefits in my a government program they had, and went to technical college and got an associate's degree in heating and air conditioning. And jobs have been pretty easy to find since then. Nobody wants to hire me now because I'm 75. They hold that against me.
How long was that school for air conditioning?
2 year.
Really?
Yeah.
So you went back into the Coast Guard, did the same job. Was this after the Coast Guard?
No, the school was before the Coast Guard. So you said you've gone to reunions.
Did you join any veterans associations?
Well, I'm part of the Richard S. Edwards Association, the second ship the destroyer was on. I'm part of their association, and I'm in the American Veterans.
What do you participate there? I've never gone to any of those. What's that like?
I've only gone to a couple of meetings. I mostly support them financially.
Oh, I see. Did your military service, how did that affect your life, that short period of time?
Well, they were kind of my glory days, I guess. Like I said earlier, they changed me from being a silly kid to a silly adult. And I grew up quite a bit in those 3 years in the Navy.
Did you meet anyone that you get married to, or?
After I got out, I was down at my dad's bowling alley, and there was a lady that worked for him painting the gutters. And I grabbed the brush and went down and was helping her paint gutters and visiting with her. And she asked me if I was going to stick around in Shenandoah. I said, well, I don't know. If I can find what I'm looking for, I will. She says, what are you looking for? And I said, a girlfriend. She says, what kind of girls do you like? I said, nice. She says, here's my niece's address, phone number. So I called her up and started dating her. See, I got out of the Navy 27th of July. I started dating Carol on the 13th of August, and we got married the 15th of December.
She was nice.
One marriage.
Yes. How did she didn't look bad upon your military service then?
No.
No?
No, not at all. She passed away this year.
Oh, really? How did you, what happened?
I think she had a stroke. The hospital treated her for COVID and she died.
Oh, really?
She didn't have any COVID symptoms. She had symptoms of a stroke, and they treated her for COVID.
Did you have kids? Children?
Yes.
Really?
Got a son lives in Plattsmouth who's about 50, and one that lives in Morton Mills, Iowa, that is about 43.
Did they take up your military service? Or?
Nope.
No?
Nope. Bad idea.
What message would you like to leave future generations? Your legacy, or
I guess, well, I don't guess, I know. A person should live their life in the proper way, worship Jesus. If you don't defend your country, the enemies are going to take it over, and you're not going to like it anymore. People say they don't like this country. They haven't been to other countries. They don't know what other countries' living conditions, at least they were when I was younger. And some of those places are horrible. And I think this is the best country in the world.
Do you ever go back to any of those places you visited?
No.
Do you have anything that you wanted to share about your service experience that you've never with, yeah, is there an experience that you want to share?
Yeah. On my first ship, when we went through the Suez Canal, we stopped at Port Said, Arabia, and they looked around the ship and found the two most expendable guys and sent us over to get mail. And we went to the pier and waited for the Marines from the English Marines to come and get us. We got in the back of a big pickup truck, and they took us to the airport. On the way to the airport, we were talking to the Marine in the back with his assault rifle in his arms, and we passed an apartment complex. Really a nice looking apartment complex, except for all the windows were boarded up. And there was no dirt in the yard, there's just dirt in the yard, no grass. The place looked like it was brand new and abandoned. I asked him what was the deal. He says that the people didn't want to live in houses, they wanted to live in tents. So they built them these apartment houses, and people went in and stripped all the soluble stuff, the wiring, the plumbing, the everything that they could get out of those apartments, and sold them, and were using the apartment building as a garbage dump. They take the garbage in and throw it in the farthest back room, and when it got full they shut the door and fill up the next room, and then shut the door and fill up the next room. And he said they were systematically filling up the place with garbage. As we got near the end of this apartment complex, there was an Arabian with a big rock in his hand going, and this holding the rock so he could throw it at us as we drove by. The Marine got his assault rifle and pointed at the man. The man just kind of dropped the rock and walked away. When we got to the airport, what we could see of the airport, it was on a T road, and what we could see was a nice looking modern airport. And I commented on it. I said, it's a nice looking airport. And he says, what you can see is, we got up to the T, this side of the airport was gone. It was a pile of rubble. Somebody mailed a bomb. The other side of the airport was nice. We got our mail and went back to the pier and flagged the ship so they could come and get us. Send a small boat in to get us. And the other guy and I bought a bunch of junk food from a little stand there, and got back to the ship with our bags of junk food and a bag of mail, and everybody was trying to convince us that we should give them our junk food. No, we risked our life to go get this, you didn't. But I can remember that one pretty clear.
Wow.
We pulled into Trikamli Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, and found out that we were the first American ship to pull into Trikamli Ceylon since 1946, the year I was born. So it's been about 19 years since a Navy ship had been in there. And they had things that kind of puzzled me, like they had lizards crawling on the wall in the hotel because they kept the bugs down. They didn't have refrigeration, so the beer was hot. The place was backward. It was like something out of the 1800s, and it kind of surprised me that it was that far from modern civilization. The Philippines was kind of the same.
So that would be the strangest thing you ever saw, the backwards of the society.
Yeah, I grew up in America where back in the 50s things were more modern than they were. You see things in old movies that were more modern than Ceylon and the Philippines were.
What do you wish more people knew about the veteran, Vietnam vet?
Well, like I said, I've never really had any problem with people, but I know a lot of people did. I wish that people would give the veterans their respect, their due. Without the military services protecting this country, it would have been taken over by communists or socialists, and our lifestyle would be drastically different than it is now. And people would not like what they did to our country by not being willing to participate in the military service or support the service. I wish my sons would have gone in. It would have grown them up, and it would have taught them more respect for our country.
What would you like to tell your sons in the video if they came?
And I love them.
Just tell them I love them.
I wish they would have gone in the military, but they had their reasons not to, and that's their choice.
Well, thank you, David. I thank you for your service. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you for yours.
Thank you.